My daughter chose her millionaire father until he left her with nothing. If someone had asked me years ago what the most painful thing a mother could ever experience was, I would have said losing her child. Today, my answer is different. The greatest pain isn't when your child dies. It's when your child is still alive, yet chooses to erase you from their life with their own hands. My daughter did exactly that on the very day the judge finalized the end of my 28-year marriage. She looked me straight in the eyes. Not a single tear fell. Then she said the one sentence that still echoes through my nightmares to this day. "Mom, you've always had a poor person's mindset. I choose, Dad." Just one sentence. 28 years as a wife, 23 years as a mother. Reduced to ashes. 3 years later, on a cold October night, just before 11, someone knocked on my front door. When I opened it, I saw Emily, my daughter. Her perfectly styled hair was soaked and tangled by the rain. One heel had snapped off her designer shoes. Her eyes were bloodshot, as though she hadn't slept in days. She clutched a small, worn-out suitcase. No designer handbag. No expensive jewelry. None of the pride she wore the day she walked away from me. Emily lowered her head for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice shattered. "Mom, I don't have anywhere else to go." I stood there in silence. 3 years earlier, she had abandoned me to choose a wealthy father. 3 years later, she had returned to the very woman she once called a failure. I didn't know whether I should close the door or open my heart. My name is Linda Carter. I'm 58 years old. If you happened to live in Maple Creek 10 years ago, there's a good chance you remember my family. People used to call us the perfect example of the American dream. A beautiful 2-story White House surrounded by blooming hydrangeas. A successful husband. A bright, hardworking daughter. And SUV parked neatly in the driveway. Weekend barbecues with the neighbors. Family photos filled with smiles and laughter. From the outside, our life looked so perfect that people envied us. But there was one thing no one ever saw. Behind every one of Richard's achievements, there was a woman who had become almost invisible. That woman was me. 28 years ago, when Richard and I got married, he was nothing more than a construction site supervisor earning just enough to cover the rent. I worked as an accountant. Neither of us came from money. We started our marriage with exactly $3,000 in savings. We worked during the day. At night, we sat together calculating every bill. There were months when we had to choose between repairing our old car or buying a washing machine. In the end, I chose to wash our clothes by hand, because Richard needed that old car to visit potential clients. I truly believed, as long as a husband and wife kept moving in the same direction, no hardship could defeat them. And little by little, life did get better. Richard started his own construction company. I quit my job to become the accountant for his business. No employment contract, no salary, no official title. Just one simple belief. This wasn't Richard's company. It was our family's company. When Emily was born, I gave up nearly every personal dream I had. I spent my days raising our daughter, and my nights balancing the company's books. There were evenings when I worked until 3 in the morning to finish tax reports, then woke up again at 6 to make breakfast for Richard and Emily. I never complained, because every time Richard wrapped his arms around me and whispered, "One day, I'll make it all up to you," I believed him. What I didn't know back then was that some promises only sound beautiful when people are still poor. The day my daughter chose money over her mother, I didn't sleep at all that night. Richard never came home. Our king-sized bed suddenly felt colder than it ever had before. At 6 the next morning, I made coffee, as I always did. Routine is often the last thing we lose after a devastating shock. Emily came downstairs. She avoided looking at me. I set my coffee cup on the table. "How long have you known about your father's affair?" She stayed silent. "Emily, I'm asking you." Nearly 10 seconds passed before she finally answered. "More than 4 months. It felt as if someone had wrapped a hand around my heart and squeezed. 4 months. Yes! And it never crossed your mind to tell me?" Emily lowered her head. "At first, I wanted to." "Then what changed?" "Dad said everything would work itself out." I laughed. A bitter, heartbreaking laugh. "Work itself out? He cheated on me. He lied to me. He made me live like a fool. And that's what you call working out?" Emily's patience began to wear thin. "Mom, you always look at everything emotionally. Dad looks at reality." I stared at my daughter. She was no longer the little girl who used to cling to my leg whenever she got a bad grade. She was a grown woman now, and she sounded exactly like Richard. 2 weeks later, Richard filed for divorce. The official reason listed in the paperwork read, irreconcilable differences. Just 2 words. 28 years of marriage reduced to 2 cold, legal words. Richard's attorney moved quickly. He demanded a division of our assets. He demanded that I move out of our home. He insisted several of our properties be sold. That was the moment I finally understood. Richard hadn't simply fallen in love with another woman. He had been planning to leave me for a very long time. The first day in court, Emily sat beside Richard, not beside me. When the attorney asked which parent she wanted to live with after the divorce, Emily stood up. She looked straight at me. I can still remember that look. There wasn't even a trace of hesitation. "I want to live with my father," the judge asked. "Why?" Emily took a deep breath. "Because my father can give me a better future." I closed my eyes. I knew she wasn't lying. Richard had the mansion, the luxury cars, the multi-million-dollar company. And me, I had nothing more than a small rental apartment after the divorce. But that wasn't what hurt the most. The next sentence did. Emily looked directly at me. "Mom, you've always lived in the past. You don't understand how the world works anymore. Dad is the one who knows what I really need." The courtroom fell silent. I could feel dozens of eyes fixed on me, but I couldn't hear any of them. All I could hear was the sound of my own heart breaking. After the hearing, I ran after Emily in the courthouse hallway. "Emily," she stopped. "I'm not angry with you. I just want to ask you one question. For 23 years, who stayed awake all night whenever you had a fever?" Emily didn't answer. "Who quit her job to raise you?" Silence. "Who drove you to school? To your exams? To the hospital? Who was always there every time you cried?" Emily bit her lip. I stepped 1 pace closer. Just once. "Look me in the eyes, and tell me none of those things ever mattered." Emily looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. For one brief moment, I truly believed she was about to hug me. Then Richard walked over. He placed his hand on her shoulder. "Let's go." Emily turned around. She never looked back. That was the last time I saw my daughter. For nearly 3 years, news about Richard's new life spread through Maple Creek almost overnight. He bought a luxurious lakeside mansion. Vanessa moved in with him. Emily filled Instagram with photos of her new lifestyle. Yachts, champagne, Paris, Dubai, Rolex watches, Hermes bags, Louis Vuitton shopping trips, a new vacation almost every week, a new luxury car every month. Emily's old friends kept sharing those photos. Some of them even sent them to me. At first, I looked. Eventually, I blocked every single one of them. I couldn't bear to watch my daughter smiling inside a life that had been built upon her mother's betrayal. One Sunday afternoon, I was working a part-time shift at a local bookstore. A regular customer walked in. She looked at me with quiet sympathy. "I ran into Emily the other day." I forced a smile. "Is she doing well?" The woman hesitated. She said, "From now on, she only has one family, Richard, Vanessa, and herself." I stood there, frozen. She kept talking, but I didn't hear another word. All I remember is that evening, after closing the bookstore, I sat alone in my car and cried for nearly an hour. For the first time in my life, I wasn't crying because my husband had betrayed me. I was crying because I had finally realized I had lost my only daughter. 3 years passed. 3 long years. 1,095 days. During that entire time, Emily never called me. Not once. Not a single phone call. Not a single text message. Not even a Christmas card. On my 59th birthday, my phone remained silent. But by then, I had stopped waiting. I had learned how to live on my own. I sold my wedding ring. I sold the watch Richard once gave me. I moved into a small house on the outskirts of town. During the day, I worked as an accountant for a local business. In the evenings, I volunteered at the public library. My life wasn't wealthy, but it was peaceful. For the first time in nearly 30 years, I slept through the night. I no longer wondered what time Richard would come home. I no longer checked credit card statements. I no longer asked myself what lie he was telling today. I honestly believed that chapter of my life was over. Until one morning, the local newspaper printed a headline across its front page. Carter Development CEO under investigation for financial fraud. I froze. According to the article, multiple company projects had been massively overvalued. There were loans worth tens of millions of dollars, fraudulent contracts, missing funds. Richard's name appeared everywhere, alongside Vanessa Cole. I folded the newspaper shut, not because I felt sorry for Richard, but because I immediately thought of Emily. Where was she? Did she even know what was happening? Over the following weeks, the news only grew worse. The company's bank accounts were frozen. Investors pulled out one after another. Employees re-signed in waves. The company's partner businesses saw their stock prices collapse. The lakeside mansion was seized by the bank. The yacht went up for sale. The Ferrari disappeared from the garage. Everything collapsed so quickly. Even the media seemed shocked. Oddly enough, I wasn't happy. When you've loved someone for 28 years, you don't celebrate watching them fall apart. You simply mourn. Everything the two of you once built together. One afternoon, I was organizing books at the library. My phone vibrated. An unknown number. Hello? Silence. Then, a slow, exhausted breath. Linda. I recognized the voice instantly. Richard. He sounded years older. What do you want? I just wanted to talk. I don't think we have anything left to say. Linda. Please. I was about to hang up. Then he said one sentence. Emily isn't doing well. My hand froze. What happened to her? Richard was silent for a long moment. Vanessa left. She took almost everything that was left. Emily. Vanessa fooled her too. I closed my eyes. A strange feeling washed over me. It wasn't satisfaction. It wasn't pity. It was simply exhaustion. A week later, I met Sarah. Emily's best friend from college. She sat across from me at a small coffee shop. Mrs. Carter, I think you deserve to know the truth. Sarah told me that after Richard came under investigation, Vanessa quietly transferred most of the family's remaining assets into overseas accounts. By the time everything fell apart, she had vanished. No goodbye. No forwarding address. No one knew where she had gone. Richard was left to face the investigators alone. And Emily, for the first time in her life, had no money, no friends, no one left standing beside her. Sarah lowered her head. Those people only loved Emily's money. Once the money disappeared, so did they? I said nothing, because I had learned that lesson 3 years earlier. Emily simply hadn't believed me. That night, I opened the old memory box beneath my bed. Inside were photographs of Emily, her first day of school, her graduation, her 18th birthday. I gently ran my fingers across one of the pictures. Before I realized it, tears rolled down my face. Even after everything she had done to me, even after choosing her father over her mother, even after never apologizing, inside a mother's heart, Emily was still the little girl who used to run into my room hugging her teddy bear every time thunder shook the windows. I couldn't help wondering, at this very moment, did she have anyone left to hold while she cried? 2 days later, just before 11 o'clock at night, a heavy rainstorm pounded against the windows. Someone knocked on my front door. 3 slow, weak knocks. I opened it. A young woman stood on my porch. Her hair was tangled. Her face was pale and hollow. Her coat was soaked through. An old suitcase rested beside her feet. It took me several seconds to recognize her, Emily. She looked at me. Her eyes were swollen and red. Tears streamed silently down her cheeks. Mom, her voice trembled so badly she could barely speak. I don't have a home anymore. I stood there, unable to move. 3 years earlier, she had walked out of this house wearing a designer dress and climbing into Richard's sports car. 3 years later, she had come back, with nothing left but an old suitcase and empty hands. I stood at the doorway for a long time. Emily stood there in silence. The only sound between us was the rain pounding against the porch roof. 3 years earlier, she had walked out of this house without looking back. 3 years later, she had returned with nothing but an old suitcase. I took a slow, deep breath. Then I stepped aside. Come in. Emily lowered her head. Thank you. Her voice was so soft it was almost swallowed by the rain. I handed her a towel, then an old set of my clothes. After changing, she sat quietly at the kitchen table, both hands wrapped tightly around a steaming cup of tea. Yet her whole body continued trembling. I couldn't tell whether she was cold or simply ashamed. I placed a bowl of hot soup in front of her. Eat, Emily stared at it. Her eyes turned red. It's been 3 days since I've had a real meal. I didn't ask any more questions. I simply sat across from her. She ate slowly, one spoonful at a time. Halfway through the bowl, Emily broke down. Tears fell into the soup. "Mom, I'm sorry." Those were the 2 words I had waited 3 years to hear. Yet when they finally came, they didn't bring me the relief I thought they would. The next morning, Emily told me everything. After Richard came under investigation, nearly all of their accounts had been frozen. Vanessa disappeared overnight. She took the last of the money. She took the most important documents with her. Richard was sued. The media hounded him relentlessly. The people who used to toast champagne with him every weekend disappeared overnight. Emily thought her friends would stay by her side. They didn't. The phone that once rang constantly went silent. The party invitations stopped. The people who used to call her bestie blocked her number. One former friend even told her, "If you're broke, don't bother calling me." Emily gave a bitter laugh as she remembered it. I honestly thought they were my family. I looked at her. "Do you understand now who your real family is?" Emily lowered her head. Tears rolled onto her hands. A week later, Richard called me. His voice sounded weaker than ever. "Linda, I'd like to see Emily." I looked over at my daughter. She quietly shook her head. "I'm not ready." I returned to the phone. "Emily doesn't want to see you." Richard remained silent. Then he whispered, "I don't blame her. I just want to apologize." It was the first time in nearly 30 years that I had heard Richard say those words. But it was too late. Everything was simply too late. Emily began searching for work. She submitted dozens of job applications. No one hired her. Some employers recognized the Carter name. Others had read the headlines about Richard. Some simply saw a resume with almost no real work experience. For the first time in her life, Emily learned what rejection felt like. Every evening she came home looking exhausted. One night she sat beside me. "Mom, back then, whenever you came home late from work, I never once asked if you were tired." I smiled gently. "Now you understand," Emily nodded. "I've only been working as a waitress for 3 days, and my feet hurt so much I can't even sleep." I didn't say anything. I simply rested my hand on her shoulder. It was the first time we had touched each other in 3 years. Emily burst into tears, crying like the little girl she used to be. A few months later, she found a job at a small bookstore. The pay wasn't much, but Emily worked harder than anyone else. Every morning she woke up at 6. She took the bus to work. She packed her own lunch. No more designer labels, no more luxury cars, no more lavish vacations. Just a 26-year-old woman, learning how to build a life from the ground up. One evening, Emily handed me an envelope. Inside were $300. "This is for rent." I gently pushed it back. "You don't have to," Emily shook her head. "I need to. I've depended on you for far too long. If you don't accept it, I'll never forgive myself." I accepted the envelope, not because I needed the money, but because, for the very first time, my daughter finally understood the value of honest work. 1 year later, Emily took me to the cemetery, where Richard was buried. After years of lawsuits, investigations, and unbearable pressure, he died of a heart attack. His grave was simple. None of his wealthy friends came. No successful businessmen. No lavish gatherings. Only me, Emily, and a bouquet of white flowers. Emily laid the flowers down gently, then whispered, "I forgive you, Dad, but I'll never repeat your mistakes." I looked up at the sky. For the first time in many years, I truly felt that the past had finally come to an end. People often ask me whether I regret opening the door for Emily on that rainy night. My answer is always the same: no. Forgiveness isn't about whether someone else deserves it. It's about whether your own heart deserves peace. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It took Emily 3 painful years to learn a lesson, one she should never have had to pay such a terrible price for. Money can buy a mansion. It can buy luxury cars. It can buy people who want to stand beside you while you're successful. But only genuine love stays when you've lost everything. Today, every Sunday morning, my daughter and I still sit on the front porch together, drinking coffee. No one mentions Richard. No one talks about Vanessa. We simply enjoy the life we have now. And every once in a while, Emily smiles at me and quietly says, "Mom, thank you for opening the door that night." I always give her the same answer: "No, I opened that door because you never truly left my heart. Thank you for spending your time with Veritale. If this story touched your heart or gave you something to think about, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another unforgettable story. Never judge the people who truly love you by the size of their wallet. One day, you may discover that the richest heart was worth far more than the richest man. Until next time, every story leaves a lesson. Every lesson shapes a life. This is Veritale. We'll see you in the next story.